airbrushes are awesome, right? But they do come with some drawbacks. They're quite expensive and they're hard to use indoors unless you've got a proper setup, but you can get some amazing effects. Like you can get this glow effect really easily, you can get really nice transitions across your models from different colours, and they're really nice to use. So I brought this airbrush from Temu for £7.34. Honestly, I think that's cheaper than most Games Workshop models. I don't think there's a model which is cheaper than that. The airbrush itself comes in this box. It's obviously designed for like beauty effects like nail art and stuff like that. It comes with a USB charging cable, some little cleaning brushes. This here is the compressor itself. So it has a button there which it turns it on and off, and it has two settings. This is where it screws onto the airbrush. This is the airbrush itself. It's got the thread there at the bottom to be screwed onto. It's a single action trigger, so it doesn't go up and down like most airbrushes, but it just goes backwards and forwards to pull the needle backwards and forwards inside the airbrush itself. We've got the cap here to cover the well. You can see in there, pretty standard, just goes down, and you can kind of see the needle in there a little bit. If you look in the end, you can see the needle poking out there. This has got a basically like a two-part internal part, but it doesn't have a separate crown, so if you have to clean the needle tip, it is a bit awkward, but overall, you know, pretty standard stuff. The build quality is pretty cheap. Like this thread here is like a plastic thread for the rear part, which is not ideal. You can see the needle here, and yeah, obviously that's how it works. The needle goes backwards and forwards to let the paint move from the hopper into the nozzle, and yeah, the air carries it away onto our model. So yeah, it's a pretty cheap basic airbrush, but you know, it looks like it looks the part. It screws onto the compressor like this, just, you know, spin it on there. One thing with this airbrush, because it doesn't have a double action trigger, so the air, when you turn it on, is going to be on constantly. You can't use this airbrush when it's charging, but it has a little USB slot there. It also has two extra paint hoppers here, which are in this clear plastic, which is interesting. I've not seen that before. I'm not really sure I'm going to use those. It's just going to give me like, just going to remind you how dirty the inside of your airbrush gets. It also comes with a little pipette. We've got a Mark 6 Marine here with a plasma gun, and we're going to try and copy this scheme. And we're going to be using Game Air paints, we're going to use a normal acrylic paint, and then we're going to be using some contrast paints as well. So a nice range of paints to go through the airbrush. And of course, we have got some airbrush cleaner. Whenever you get the airbrush out, a good thing to do when you start the session is just to put a few drops of cleaner into the airbrush. What this is going to do is going to help lubricate the parts inside there, just to stop paint sticking to the parts themselves. We're going to turn this airbrush on here. We just press the button once and that's on, and then we can see all we have to do is pull back the trigger and the cleaner comes out. As simple as that. So if the nozzle is a bit loose, then you might get some bubbles inside, or you might not get the paint coming out properly, so make sure that's done. Got my little DIY airbrush booth here. Obviously the good thing with this airbrush is it's very portable, so you could take it outside and just spray anywhere outside with it rather than using it indoors. Here I'm just cleaning the airbrush, putting some cleaner through there just to lube up the parts, and as I said, the airbrush is on, and I've just put some black paint in there now, and yeah, it looks like it's coming out alright. So this is Vallejo model color black. This is what I use to prime most models, and we're just going to give the model a coat of it all over. You can see here that the airbrush is performing alright. It's not got mega high pressure, so the paint is spattering a little bit there. We could reduce this by adding a couple of drops of thinner to the paint, but just for priming, it seems to be doing okay. To clean the airbrush out, we're going to add some drops of thinner into it, give it a little swizzle around with a brush. Use an old brush so you can really get in there without having to worry about ruining the bristles. And yeah, just get into all those nooks and crannies, just give it a good swizzle out, and then we're going to take a airbrush cleaning pot. These are just an essential piece of kit. Obviously you don't have to use one of these, you could just use like a bottle or something, just to spray that excess in there, but these are quite useful. They're easy to clean out. Got to make sure the airbrush is on with this one to actually spray, and yeah, we just spray that into the pot, and we can see that disappears down into there. We can do it a couple more times if we've got some leftovers, but here's our primer done. The black doesn't show up very well on camera, unfortunately, but it's a nice smooth coat. It's gone on really well, so yeah, first impressions, pretty good. For the next part, we've added a couple of drops of cleaner to the next colour, which is dark Fleshtone. This is another Vallejo Game Air colour. And we're going to mix it up just by putting our finger over the nozzle and then pulling back on the trigger while the compressor is running. Just mixes the paint inside the hopper, just to thin it out a little bit so we can get a smoother coat with this. And we're going to paint this all over the model. Again, you can see it's going on quite nicely here. There's no issues with the pressure on this. I'm just trying to get into all the nooks and crannies without overspraying on anything. This airbrush does have two settings, so it has the higher power setting and then a lower pressure setting. I only used it on throughout the whole video on the higher setting, so I didn't even try the lower setting because the higher setting just felt like it was maybe a little bit too low for pushing through really thick paint, but more than adequate for pushing through any thinner paints. Once that's dry, we can see that it has given a really nice smooth coat of paint across the model. We can't see any spider webbing on there, it's not built up too much in any areas, and it's actually gone on really nicely. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use some white. Now white is infamously quite hard to airbrush because it speckles a lot. So one thing I do to avoid that is I use a little bit of cleaner or thinner into the airbrush to begin with. And then I use the MIG matte white paint. This is a standard acrylic. You can see there's a little bit of brown inside there, so that's like remnants from the previous colour that we used where it's not cleaned out properly. I'll come on to that a little bit later with this specific airbrush because it's like kind of a design thing with it, but I can talk about that in a bit. So we can see we've watered down the white paint here, but it is still speckly, so we're going to give it a good mix, see if we can get it to come out a little bit smoother. Still speckly. If it is still speckly, the two things we can do to avoid that is to increase the pressure on the compressor. Obviously we can't do that on this one, or we can make the paint thinner. Now, the problem with making the paint thinner is it then has a tendency to spiderweb, which is obviously not ideal. We don't want to have big spiderwebs all across the model, but it does mean that the paint comes out smoother. So if we have better trigger control, we can use that to our advantage because we've got smoother paint, but obviously we just got to be aware of that to not go too hard on any particular area. So what we're doing now is we're going to pre-shade the highlights. So basically on these models where we've got the leading foot, that's the column of light where we're going to put our highlights. And then anything around that is where we're going to have our shadows. Obviously on the rear we're using the trailing foot because obviously that's the part closer to the back. I'm going to make sure we have white on the top as well, obviously, because we want the light to be coming from above. So leaving some brown on either side, and then obviously we have that column of white up the middle, up the front, over that leading edge, or leading foot even. I'm going to build that up. I could have probably built it up a bit more, but I noticed that it was starting to spiderweb a little bit. I think that's more my fault than the airbrush's fault, just from getting a bit too ahead of myself. So once that's dry, we can see it has gone on quite smooth. There is some speckling here and there, but at this stage it's nothing to worry about because we're quite early on in the process, and the next step is going to help flatten that all out anyway. So next up, we're going to use the Imperial Fist contrast paint. We're just going to put that straight into the airbrush. It's very thin as it is anyway, and we're going to use this as a filter. So basically we're going to spray it across everything that we've already done on the model, and it's all going to turn yellow, but where the brown is, that's going to be a dark yellow, and obviously where the white is, that's going to be a lighter yellow. So it's basically a concept of pre-shading and then filtering the model to get those shadows and highlights. And it's a really nice way of getting a nice rich yellow across the whole model. You'll have some really bright yellow in those highlights, but some quite dark, nice colours in the recesses. That's the airbrushing done for now, so onto the rest of the model. We're going to paint in any of the trim and like the armour joints in black, as well as some of the bits on the backpack and the gun. And then we're going to do some simple highlights here. So I'm using Skaven Blight Dinge, and we're just going to highlight into those areas where we've got the column of light, and do some edge highlights along the gun as well. And then next up we can use Dawnstone and just edge highlight a little bit more and just refine those highlights even more. Just some really simple highlights here, and obviously again refine those edge highlights on the rest of the model. Last thing we're going to do is going to use some white and just really define those highlights that little bit more to make them really pop. With the white, we're also going to paint in the plasma coil. Here we're using the 2 thin coats white star. It's actually a really nice paint. So this is the stage we're at the moment. There's not a lot of definition on the model, so we've got those highlights which look really nice, but the yellow is kind of just there. We need some real recesses, so we're using this dark brown for green vehicles by MIG, and this is an enamel wash. So what we're going to use is use a enamel liner brush, which is basically this brush which has got some mad long bristles. They're like 20mm long, you can see here, and we dip it into some enamel thinner and then just wipe off some of the excess and then dip it into our enamel wash. And when we touch this to any of the recesses on the model, it's just going to flow really nicely into those. For anyone who's going to ask in the comments, no, I haven't varnished the model. This is just going straight from the paint to the enamel thinner, so the enamel wash, so even so you can see that it does flow just really nicely into that, even without any varnish. And yeah, we're just going to go around anywhere there's a recess to add that extra definition to the model. It's a really satisfying process to do. If you're enjoying the video, guys, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps. And if you want to see stuff like this, like before it comes available on YouTube, or see the unedited versions, you can also subscribe to my Patreon. Anything from the £4 and up tier gets to see all my videos early and gets to see unedited footage. And then there's also some competitions and things like that on there where you can win a model a month or get tuition from me. So yeah, please check it out if you're interested in supporting the channel more. Thanks very much. If we go a bit hard with the enamel wash, what we can do is reduce it back with some enamel thinner on a normal paintbrush, and we just get some of the thinner on a brush, wipe some of the excess away because we don't want to flood the model and ruin the lining we've just done. But yeah, just get it on there and brush away any excess. Once we've done that, we can see that the model look is looking a lot nicer now. Got a lot more definition in there, and those highlights really pop a lot more because obviously we've got the shadows and highlights. Just realised I missed this little holster here, so we're going to slap some wildwood on that. Nice. Also missed the handle, but never mind. So for some weathering, I'm going to use some Rhinox hide here. I'm just going to add some little chips to any of the sort of like edges. And the way I like to do this is work on the edge itself first, and then work my way in with some extra little chips going into the area. You can do this around the model, do it wherever you like, wherever you think there might be wear and tear on the armor colour, really. Yeah, just work your way around and have some fun with it. You can go really hard if you want to, but I like to do it kind of subtle. For the next step, we're going to add some rust streaks to those chipped areas. This just adds a bit of an extra dimension to those chips to say that, you know, he's been at war for a long time. Those armor plates are rusting and chipping away. Also, the orange goes nicely with the yellow. I'm going to paint the eyes in white as well, again using White Star. And now we're back to our airbrush. So it's been a day or two since the last session. You can see with this, the hopper of this airbrush, paint does tend to sit around the rim of it rather than flow down into where the needle is. So it's kind of annoying. But it's a new session anyway, so we're going to turn the airbrush on, put some cleaner through it to lubricate everything up, and then we're going to thin down some more white paint. Similar to last time, so we can put some cleaner in there. We're going to add some white in there. This is the matte white from MIG again. And now once we've got our white as smooth as we can get it, we're going to paint basically a halo around the plasma coil. So just really carefully, really small finger movements just to get that white to sort of like a really thin coat of it, or not even a coat, just like this halo effect around where the glow is. You can see already on the camera, it's making it look like it's a light, it's a light source. So that's what we're trying to get with this. And we're going to do it around the gun, and we're going to do some on the chest behind the gun as well. And if it hits some of the shoulder pads and the face, then that's fine. For the glow, we're going to use Athematic Blue, which is a really nice turquoisey colour. And this is a contrast paint again, so we're going to be doing the same thing. So we're going to be filtering over all the white that we've just done, but you don't want to go really hard. You want to kind of leave that white, well, not leave it, but you want to just give it a really faint filter to give it like a blue tinge. And what I tried to do as well is leave the center of the top part of the coil showing as white, because this kind of like helps to sell the glow effect as well. You want to hit all of the halo areas that you've just done with the white, with the Athematic Blue, because that's going to change those into obviously the blue colour that we want. And also, because you're aiming to cover all of those, you will naturally end up covering some of the areas that outside of where you hit the halo, and that's going to sell this blue glow effect more. You can really tell it looks really, really bright and like a light source on our screen here. And we're just using very small finger movements here just to get the paint where we want it to be. For the base, we're just using some texture paste and some different enamels on there. Overall, I think this airbrush is really good. So if you haven't got the money or the space for a full airbrush compressor and all the whole setup, which that basically you're looking at 100 quid plus for a starting setup. If you haven't got that or the space to get one, you could use one of these USB airbrushes, and I've shown in this video that you can get some pretty nice results just from one of these really cheap airbrushes. I think there are drawbacks to it. The build quality is not great. I don't know how long it will last, and the pressure isn't ideal because you're not able to adjust it. But overall, I think these are great pieces of kit, and if you want to just dabble in airbrushing, I think these are ideal. Thank you for watching the video, everyone. It's a really fun one to make something like this, a little bit different to my usual how to paint videos, while still showing you how to paint something. If you did enjoy it, please let me know in the comments below, and like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps. Also, as I said before, if you do want to support the channel even further, there's my Patreon, where there's lots of different rewards and things like that you can get on. And yeah, I just want to say thank you very much everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thanks very much.